So staying with us, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi has extended the Zimbabwean exemption permit by 6 months. The extension affects 180,000 permit holders who faced deportation. The permits will now expire in December of 2023. For more on this, we're joined by Hedda Schensema, who's the director at Cliff Decker Hofmeyer. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. A lot of controversy around these permits and, of course, legal challenges also happening at the same time. Perhaps give us your perspective on whether or not this extension was one that could have been foreseen.
Good afternoon, Paul. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers. Most definitely, Paul, given the backlog that the Department of Home Affairs is experiencing, it was foreseeable that the department would have had to extend the expiration of the permit date being the end of June. Given, as I said, given the backlog and the thousands of people who are still currently waiting for an outcome in respect of their applications, and thousands more who are intending to apply for alternative visas. And
what would happen then at the end of the year once those who have now obtained an alternative visa can no longer work? What will need to happen to the foreign nationals?
Paul, if you are unauthorized to be in South Africa, unfortunately, the response to that would be you'd have to leave South Africa. So if you are not authorized to be in our country with a formal visa or an authorized visa allowing you to remain in the country and allowing you to work, you will have to leave the Republic.
The Zimbabwean exemption permit has a long-standing history. And there really has been a lot of back and forth in terms of legal challenges and, perhaps foreign nationals trying to find a legal way for ZEP holders to stay in South Africa. Perhaps, let's go back a little bit and try and understand and grasp the idea around these permits.
So the idea at the time was given the as you've already said, the 180,000 Zimbabwean nationals that were in our country and the mass of applications that were being submitted to the Department of Home Affairs, the minister at the time then decided that an exemption permit in the form of the ZEP would then be granted to the Zimbabwean nationals, allowing them to remain in South Africa. And as you're well aware, Paul, that ZEP has been renewed, if one can say that, on several occasions, now the latest being obviously until the 31st of December 2023.
What visas can ZEP holders perhaps apply for, and can they do so from within South African borders? And also, I would imagine the process would also be long.
Yes, that's correct, Paul. So the first answer to your question, whether they could do it within the borders of South Africa, absolutely. Each case obviously has its own merits, has its own circumstances and requirements, but there's such examples would be the spousal visa or a relative's visa, a critical skills visa perhaps. But as I've said, each individual would have to have their own application. They would have their own reasons, their circumstances, whether or not they would then be eligible for a certain type of alternative visa.
With our back and forth questions, what would happen if the permit holder applied on time, but the visa hasn't been issued by the 31st of December?
It's our understanding, Paul, that if you have proof that you have applied for an alternative visa, the minister will allow you to remain in South Africa and currently to continue working. That is our understanding at this stage.
And looking at employers, I mean, what do they need to know about the consequences of employing foreign nationals without the correct legal documentation?
The Immigration Act has always stated that it's a breach of the Immigration Act if you are employing a foreign national who's not authorized to be in South Africa, number one, and to be working in South Africa. So you as the employer must ensure that the foreign national that you are employing is legally able to be in South Africa and is legally permitted to work in South Africa. So there is an onus, obviously, on the employer as well to ensure from a verification perspective that the foreign national is legally permitted to be in South Africa and legally permitted to work here.
And what do employers need to know about adhering to fair processes of dismissal in accordance to the Labour Relations Act in South Africa?
Paul, irrelevant of my status, I'm entitled to the protection that our employment legislation affords every employee within South Africa. So whether I'm legal or not, For example, if I weren't a South African and I was illegally working in South Africa, for example, I would then be entitled to the full protection of the employment legislation, and my employer would have to ensure that my dismissal is both procedurally and substantively fair. So it's irrelevant of my status. I'm still fully entitled to the employment legislation protection.
You said earlier on that it was almost inevitable that there would be an extension granted with this matter. And as you try and perhaps, look at the legal challenges that have surfaced around the ZEP, how much ammunition do you think the South African government has when it comes to ensuring adherence to the initial call for the ZEP?
Well, Paul, as you've said, there's several legal challenges. The main one, if I can call that at this stage, is the Helen Suzman Foundation application, which we're waiting the judgment for, and we're hopeful that that'll come by the end of June. So depending on what our courts tell us or dictate to us will then determine government's way forward.
Yeah. And from a legal perspective, which way could it sway, looking at the two options and what it would mean?
It could go either way, Paul. It determines, as you know, it was a full bench of judges who had heard the matter. So at this stage, it could go either way.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now.